Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparutade sangamatassa tawara ye sodavanta bamunjantu satang. So this will be my last Sunday talk here, and I just express my appreciation for the hospitality offered by the Sangha and the lay community, and very pleasing to see so many people interested in the Dhamma. And when I was in Thailand the past 10 years, before returning to the West, I was getting old. I left Amaravati and when I was 76. And then I thought I'd pass away in Thailand. I already have a coffin waiting for me. And then when I was 86, I was still quite healthy. So I came back to live in Amaravati in the UK because I spent so many years of my life there, and I thought just to be able to share what I've learned a lifetime in this, living within this particular tradition in this form, and speaking from experience. So there's been a request to reflect on the Brahma Viharas, and these are always inspiring to reflect upon because they represent, what they call the divine abodes, or the abodes of Brahma. Vihara means an abode. Brahma is God, divine. And so what is divine? And then we have it's that English word, we have certain beliefs in divine beings, or divinity is something very high, and we're mere mortals. And Brahma is, if you're a Hindu, is the ultimate deity. And so this is inspired thinking, because it's concepts like metta is the first Brahma Vihara, which is loving kindness, and karuna, which is compassion, and mudita, sympathetic joy, and upekkha, which is equanimity. So these are realizable states. They're not like something that you've got to get, but through understanding Dhamma, then you awaken to the true nature of divinity, which you can't claim on a personal level. So when you go through the reflective practices, like is the body divine? Is that what I want, a divine body? And of course that's ridiculous. And the body's not divine. And then my emotions, my thoughts, my memories, are they divine? My ideals can sound divine, like loving kindness or unconditional love sounds very divine. And compassion, universal compassion, is really, it's beautiful, where we understand the suffering of all sentient beings in a way that's empathetic and kind and compassionate. That's a beautiful quality that human beings have. And mudita, sympathetic joy, and that was, just the joy of the beauty of the planet, the joy of beautiful friends, the joy of the flowers, or the joy that arises from autumn in New Hampshire. And there's so much joy in this realm that we're experiencing. But is it come from personal conditioning, or is it natural, sympathetic joy? Because when you try to personalize it and try to feel sympathetic joy as an ideal, it's, your personality doesn't really feel sympathetic joy. You hold it as an ideal, you want it, but what is sympathetic joy is joy itself, which is a part of the human experience of conscious. We experiencing consciousness through the senses. And then equanimity, upekkha. So upekkha is equanimous, peaceful, and we all want that. We want a peaceful life, peaceful mind, peaceful emotions. But our emotions, are they ever peaceful? Can you just, when you feel peace from some events that happen in your life, you experience the stillness and bliss of a sunset or the autumn in New Hampshire, then can you sustain that with clinging to, I want life to be like this? Immediately the joy of the moment is lost when we try to hold on to experiences of joy. And I think there's a Blake poem called "He Who Clings to Life, the joy of life vanishes, but he who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise." So there's an English poet that has very lot of Dhammic resonance. So, and when we try to develop the Brahma Viharas, it's oftentimes done from I want to feel unconditioned love and sympathetic joy and compassion. And then we have various techniques of spreading metta, kind of traditional forms, which as an ideal you can do, but in experience, living together with somebody else or in a sangha or in society, do you really feel sympathetic joy for all sentient beings? And of course, in many things we feel we take sides. We on the intellectual level is very divisive. We divide good from bad and heaven from hell, and war and peace. And so that's the nature of thought, is it's a very divisive function that we acquire after we're born. We're not born thinking in any language at all, but we're conscious. So that's important to realize. Consciousness isn't about thoughts, but it's the reality of here and now that we all recognize. We're all conscious. The forms that are sitting here are all conscious forms. And but when we believe that consciousness is personal, then it's very unsteady, because that means that we're subject to our personal conditioning, our ego, our cultural prejudices and biases, religious biases, because that's how we're conditioned with life, with beliefs in ideals, in doctrines, in creeds, in democracy, and whatever. They're all belief systems made up by human beings, and we're conditioned with these. So in the first fetter, the Sakyaditi, which is the ego, you begin to investigate. Can my ego feel unconditioned love for all sentient beings? And by just observing, it can't. It's impossible. So the ego is very divisive. It's it can imagine, kind of create a sense of loving kindness for all sentient beings as an ideal. But the experience of life is not ideal. It's about pleasure and pain, sorrow and grief, loss, about problems, personal problems with others, with society, with religion, with belief systems that you acquired. So in the terms of, you begin to see that the personality is an ephemeral, very untrustworthy thing to stabilize in, is your personal views, your personal attitudes, what you agree with is right and what you feel is wrong, and clinging to these views, right and wrong, good and bad, then we create endless unpleasant feelings towards those who don't agree. And that's the experience of the sensory conditioning that we have. But is consciousness itself, is it personal? And through my investigation, I can believe it's personal because I was brought up to believe that the consciousness is inside me, that my consciousness is separate from your consciousness. And because I feel separate as a separate form, the separation, this clinging to the separate appearances of that the senses create, is very deluding, and that's why it's hard to have world peace and fairness and justice for all, even though these are beautiful ideals. But can you sustain justice for all and perfect democracy in a realm where everything's changing and where people have different conditioning, different expectations, different prejudices, biases, beliefs, because then we conflict with each other. So on a personal level, the witness to the personal conditioning is awareness, or awareness is what I use, the word awareness, conscious awareness. Can be aware of personal conditioning. So each one of us has a different personal conditioning. Even, you're brought up in the same family, my sister and I, we were very different persons. And we were brought up by the same parents and the same kind of culture and religious conditioning. So metta, investigations into loving kindness is pure conscious awareness, because that isn't conditioned by right and wrong, good or bad. Awareness is natural state of being here and now. We're aware that we're conscious at this moment is like this. And so it's not something you've got to get, but something you begin to trust. And then conscious awareness is non-critical. So when you abide in conscious awareness or mindfulness, it's silent. It doesn't discriminate right from wrong, good or bad, male or female. And it's not personal. I can claim it with English words as my consciousness, but that's not really what you find out when you are mindful and investigating the experiences that we have as individuals. So beginning to recognize loving kindness or metta is a natural state of being. It's not a created state. It's not personal. It includes everything, everybody. And so when we spread metta, we spread it, loving kindness, to devils, to angels. It's perfectly equal amounts of metta to the worst, the best, the gods, the Brahma god, or atheists, or maniacs, or serial killers. When we divide it up, we talk about metta to pedophiles or serial killers. It's on a personal level. Can you do that? Is that possible? So, you feel those are the, two very conditions that we tend to regard as very bad. And so on the impersonal awareness, you can, because pedophiles have the same consciousness that we all have. It's not their consciousness, it's pure consciousness. It's the deathless reality that we share with all sentient beings. So then you begin to understand what unconditioned love is, or loving kindness in terms of the translations of metta. So at moments when we realize our true nature is conscious awareness, we aren't condemning or making judgments about ourselves or others. It's impossible. As a person, I can be very judgmental. So, because I've developed, a strong sense of what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad. But this is test it out for yourself, as a personal, as you see yourself as a separate individual person, can it really have loving kindness for pedophiles or serial killers? And so then, because they're wrong, and so that is a judgment we make with words. In any language, all languages have that dualistic function of discriminating between right and wrong, good and bad, heaven and hell. Then karuna, compassion, then we can be generous with compassion, like we can feel sorry for pedophiles, serial killers in one way, because we know it's a hell realm that they live in. So on a rational level, we can feel sorry for them. But at the same time, their consciousness is our consciousness. So the conditions of that we are karmically connected to may be very good, very generous, very kind, or we're brought up in just survival communities where we're just trying to survive in an unpleasant conditioning experience. And, we're programmed, conditioned to do horrible acts or think horrible thoughts. So these are the differences on the condition level, and we're all different one from another. So in loving kindness, it's not judgmental. In karuna or compassion, it's recognizing that we're subject to these delusions we've been conditioned by. We can't help it. We can't, if we've been programmed to be a serial killer, if that's how we learn to survive or how we get lost in our feelings, that's one has a sense of compassion because we're caught in very negative, very dangerous conditions that we act or speak upon, and we make others miserable and as well as ourselves. So in terms of compassion, you can understand why the world is the way it is. Why is the United States like this right now politically? And why is there so much confusion, so much division? And, on the right and wrong level, we take sides, what's right and what's wrong. But on the compassionate level, we begin to see that the conditioning is just that way. It's a karmic, what we call karma, which is about cause and effect. And if you've been conditioned to hate, to just take advantage of others, no matter what, to just follow brutal instincts and desires, then you really can't help that as a person, because that's, people can tell you you're a criminal and a serial killer and you're wrong. But the conditioning is one where that kind of activity happens. And so when we understand that, then compassion comes from mindfulness rather than personal views or opinions, prejudices and biases. So these are divine qualities. Compassion is a divine quality that we can realize for ourselves, such as metta, karuna, mudita. And so mudita, they is about, envying others, being critical of others, feeling jealous, and putting down others that you're jealous of or fear. And so we don't have this sense of sympathetic joy when some monk achieves enlightenment. And we don't feel we are. Or somebody claims to be, or somebody gets, in the office more attention, more money than you do, or and so sympathetic joy on a personal level is impossible because we're not conditioned for that. So we have images of goody two-shoes and things like that where we feel glad for everybody. But then we tend to be cynical about that because that's not our experience. We're envious of others, envy the poor of the rich, and the rich over the richer. And then we know the different status in social situations, whether you're high class or low class, or whatever. Then these are, to envy the aristocracy or the king. I've been listening to some history of England, and it's all about jealousy and fear. Not about mudita, sympathetic joy. So, British history is very interesting. It's very colorful. And so, and then upekkha is equanimity, which when I first came across that term as a samanera, as upekkha, you said indifference. You're just totally indifferent. And that didn't sound very inspiring. I don't care what happens to you. I'm equanimous. Who wins the election? Hey, I don't care. I'm equanimous. And I'm practicing equanimity. And, what is equanimity? And it's not about thoughts or sides or just being kind of idealistic and generous or totally indifferent to the society you're living in, but it's equanimity is balance. Metta and upekkha balance each other out. They're virtues that are highly recommended. So equanimity, I found, upekkha is the natural state of conscious awareness. Metta, loving kindness, non-critical conscious awareness, which is peaceful and still, silent, is equanimous. And there's no, it's not where hatred or jealousy or fear arise. Then in the mind, the conditioned realm is created out of that. It manifests from consciousness. So, and then the world that we live in, the planet, the sun and moon, stars, all the animal kingdoms, everything is manifestations of forms in consciousness. So we're all in the same consciousness. The ticks, the beetles, the turkeys here, same consciousness as me. So when I look at a turkey, I feel connected because there is that connection. Or looking at all of you, there's a connection that is ultimate reality rather than personal knowing each one of you or, having views and opinions about you as a person, as an emotional being. Then that gets into critical discrimination. But when we begin to experience loving kindness as silence, but it's not a dead silence like you go unconscious or become a zombie. It's pure consciousness is bliss, and it's here and now. It's not something you get through practicing meditation. It's something that is realizable here and now. And so even though, I could understand that when Luang Por Chah would give talks, but, then my experience was very much bound into reacting to what I see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and think, and on a personal way. So I was a person from an American background living in northeastern Thailand, which was a very different culture, the third world at that time, rice-growing villages. We went Binabat, alms collecting in villages, village Thailand in the northeast. Everything was very different. The conditioning was different. The Vinaya is a very different kind of conditioning. it was based on skillful and unskillful action and speech. So it wasn't alien to me because I was brought up to be a moral person, as trying to be virtuous as a moral individual. But it's much more complicated than the 10 Commandments or the 5 precepts, as all the monks can verify. So, learning to live within the designated structures of what right speech and right action. And then even though I could appreciate that ideally, the experience of the fear of doing something wrong, the fear of making an offense, of being criticized by other monks, by being scolded by Ajahn Chah, so the fear of being chastised or excluded or disrobed or all that, was part of the experience that one has when one is taking such a refined level of training as Vinaya. But the whole point was awareness to Luang Por Chah. So then one could take I was a student at University of California, Berkeley, which was no boundaries, just go out and experience life, whatever. Which was kind of fun when you're young, but it doesn't get you anywhere. It's just end up very confused because just following desires and with no sense of, even doing things are morally not right, you have to live with that because you remember it. So you feel guilty, you feel self-disparagement, you feel, even though you can say it doesn't matter, I don't believe in God or anything like that, just anything goes. And, as an ideal, that was rather appealing. But several years of that kind of behavior was the result was not freedom or happiness, but just more emotional confusion, guilt, and self-criticism and fear. So, recognizing that, and from my experience of having the opportunity to live in a hedonistic lifestyle, had its pleasurable moments, but they were not sustainable. And as you develop, if you're brought up with a strong sense of Christian morality, then you're conditioned to be critical of such behavior. And you can fight against it. You can rebel, become a rebel or a heretic or anything like that. Those are just reactions to the conditioning process. It's not out of wisdom that we rebel. So in 1960s Berkeley, there's a lot of rebellion going on, and, which could be quite inspiring in one way. But also one could put down the kind of rigid views of moral behavior and belief in God and Christianity and the kind of rigid attitudes of 1950s American culture, which was very black and white. And you can rebel against it, but even rebelling against it isn't very equanimous or peaceful. When you're a rebel, you look down on conformists, social conformists. So you develop a sense of superiority by rebelling against the system. So you've just, you're caught in this maelstrom of confusing ideas, because it's all coming from the intellect, from the thinking mind. And it can be, one can rebel in a skillful way or unskillful way, but it's still just operating on the conditioned level of what I believe or what I've been told to believe or what's my generation believes, and a modern American ways of looking at life. I remember it was a beatnik time in San Francisco. There was the hippie style in the 1960s. And that was very appealing to me. And so, then when I became a monk in Thailand, some of the early monks that ordained were ex-hippies. So it was fun to rebel when you're young and thumb your nose at white middle class traditions, but also it doesn't lead to equanimity or unconditioned love. I mean, you can be just as arrogant as a nonconformist as somebody who's very obedient to every rule. So on a personal level, there's nothing much you can do but recognize the personal through wisdom, through awareness, in a non-critical way. Whatever you feel, however you were brought up or conditioned, whatever your karma might be, it is the way it is. Whether it's moral and good or immoral and bad, or whether it's whatever views you have about right and wrong, you're not becoming uncritical, but you're no longer bound into the critical conditioning that we tend to identify with. So that's freedom from the conditioned realm that we can realize for ourselves. And that's equanimity, upekkha, silent witnessing in the present moment is like this. And then I began to notice what I call sound of silence, the kind of cosmic pulse that's here and now. And when I ordained as a samanera in Nong Khai, I was, as I said, referred to many times, this Word of the Buddha book, collection of Buddhist teachings, that everything is impermanent, all conditions are impermanent. And so having had a previous interest in Zen Buddhism, I'd read many Zen Buddhist books, I thought I'd make up a koan. So is there something permanent? So in the investigation of emotions and memories and that I was doing through just watching these thoughts, these memories, these emotions, repressed emotions. I was having a lot of repressed emotions, being all alone, and emotions that I avoided when I could distract myself with sense objects. But being alone in a hut in the forest, suddenly there's nothing you can distract yourself with. And you suffer a lot of restlessness and confusion, and you've learned a meditation technique that doesn't work anymore. And so you kind of don't know what to do. And these repressed emotions, were very frightening because they were nasty emotions, full of anger and hatred. And I'd always tried to be a kind of friendly and affable person. And, so I developed an affable personality by repressing the anger, resentment that would come up in consciousness. I learned to because I was punished for it when I was a child, for showing anger. So like children learn how to survive, and they develop repressive techniques to survive in a family. So I'd done that. My family was a very good family, but they were not necessarily wise family. And so all I could do was, I started studying the scriptural teachings of the Buddha, and he said, all conditions are impermanent. So I believed that. I can see I actually believed because it's written in this book. And the Buddha is supposed to have said this, that all conditions are impermanent. Then in Vipassana meditations, you start examining impermanence. It's not just believing what the Buddha said, but it's all about investigation. So I, just started observing, what I see is very obviously impermanent. And what I could taste or touch or smell. So everything is impermanent. But is there something impermanent? Is there something impermanent? And so this was the concept of anatta, no self, I could not understand till I met Luang Cha, because I felt, it's me that's being mindful. It's me that's meditating. It's me that is observing the impermanence of conditioned phenomena. But what is it that really observes phenomena? Is it, and then the five khandhas, where the fifth khandha is consciousness? I think that's impermanent because it says so in the scriptures. The five khandhas are the body, feelings of pleasure, pain, memories, emotions, and consciousness. So I just assumed consciousness was impermanent. But then being aware of this koan, was there something that was permanent? I became aware of what I refer to as sound of silence. Sometimes everything would drop away, and there'd be just this resonating pulse, kind of, it's not a real sound. And I thought, that's always here and now, even though I don't remember it. Whenever I remember it, I hear it, I notice it. So maybe the Buddha got it wrong. But then I felt as a Buddhist monk, I shouldn't say that, it's being heretical. Because loyal to the tradition, and then meeting Luang Cha a year later, I thought, he was, as I referred to many times, the Bhutto reference, Buddha, as the knowing, the witness. And suddenly that just resonated with me, the witness. And Dhamma, suddenly, because it's only Buddha that knows Dhamma, according to the scriptures. The Buddha knows the Dhamma. So and the Buddha is actually awareness itself. It's not personal, me practicing awareness, but it's here and now consciousness. And it's the same consciousness we're all experiencing at this moment. And it's still. And it has no beginning or ending, and it's not created. So just by figuring out that consciousness is not a thing, it's not a thing that is impermanent, except through the senses, like sensory consciousness is impermanent. So we, in the five khandhas, that implies, because you start with the body, with the feelings, with the memories, with the emotions that we experience through seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking, then we think of consciousness as inside. When we talk about somebody dying, then the consciousness leaves the body and goes somewhere else. So it's kind of like a soul or spirit. So in terms of, there's no conflict with the five khandhas, because that's clearly defined as part of the physical form, the manifestations of form that wouldn't be possible without consciousness. And consciousness has no, it doesn't manifest in any way. There's no, you can't objectify it. So, it's not, it's something you realize, and this is what enlightenment is, realizing what your true nature is pure conscious awareness. And and just by investigating the forms and understanding that they're all impermanent, that's true. There's no, everything, even the solar system is impermanent. The sun and moon and stars. And I remember before I ordained, I was in the Peace Corps, and I got a hold of the Heart Sutra, the Mahayana Heart Sutra, and I started reading. I said, "This is absolute nonsense." It makes no sense to me, and because I was interpreting it from a rational conditioning, that I was very attached to it, because it's not rational. But it's realizable. And that's what the Buddha's whole emphasis of Buddhist teachings is, to point the way to where we as individual forms can realize universal loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. So then the Brahmaviharas became something, not just an ideal for me, not something that, you'd like to, as a person, to develop compassion and get rid of jealousy and envy and fear and become equanimous in a peaceful way, not in a different way. And, as a person, I could quite be inspired by those ideals because they're beautiful. But as a person, I found I couldn't really sustain that. And so as a person, you start criticizing yourself, because a good bhikkhu should have spread metta for all sentient beings, and that's an ideal that you feel obliged to try to live up to. So then you find the realities of experience in Sangha life, emotions of absolute frustration, aversion, and so in terms of experience, it's the five khandhas that experience. We experience through the senses, and consciousness doesn't experience except through senses. So the manifestations are forms that arise and cease, but when you let go of the forms, then what's left is pure conscious awareness, which has no form. And that's metta, and that's upekkha, loving kindness, unconditioned love, and equanimity, just stillness, it's silent, it's bliss. So I offer this as reflection for the day.